Okay, so we are going to begin. Good morning, everyone. We are going to begin chapter 5. Chapter 5 is actually a very short chapter. So we definitely won't be taking the entire half an hour, but we will do the chapter. It's actually considered a sort of like segue from chapter 4 as a parenthesis. And then in chapter 6, it goes more into detail, but it still continues the same topic, which we began discussing last week in chapter 4, which is what exactly is the function of tzimtzum? Like, why did Hashem choose to create the world in a way that his light is concealed? In other words, we began explaining last week that the process of tzimtzum, or condensing or contracting Hashem's light, is actually a process similar to the sun and its shield. Nowadays we would say the ozone layer is protecting the sun or whatever it is, but the sun's light and warmth is too great for us to tolerate. And therefore Hashem created together with the sun, Hashem created a shield to protect us from this light. And the Alter Rebbe in last parak started explaining to us that the shield is represented by the name of Hashem Elohim, whereas the sun, the source of light and life, is represented by the name of Hashem Havaya. And Elohim, the name Elohim, serves as a shield for the name Havaya. So what happens is actually that also in last parak, the Alter Rebbe started saying that the name of Hashem Havaya, since it represents this great expansion of light and giving of light and creative forces, that is symbolized by the attribute of chesed. That corresponds actually to the attribute of chesed, whereas tzimtzum, which the function of tzimtzum is to shield this great light, to protect us from this great light, is actually corresponds to the sphera or attribute of gvura, which is severity. Now, in other words, to distill all of this in order to make it make some sort of sense, right? In other words, due to the attribute of gvura, severity, right? This chesed and gvura is the second attribute. Due to this attribute of gvura, severity, and the process of tzimtzum, they go hand in hand, created beings live with the illusion that they are independent. And they live being unaware of the divine life force sustaining them. And this applies to all created beings, but especially us, because we are thinking human beings, we are intelligent human beings. And most often, we don't feel the sustaining divine life force that is within us. We actually, because of the process of tzimtzum and the attribute of gvura, we actually feel that we're independent. Now, tzimtzum prevents the name of Havaya, the Hashem's name Havaya, prevents the intensity of this name Havaya of revealing itself in this world. It's like sort of like a shield. It is not sort of, it is a shield. The role of tzimtzum seems passive. Like it doesn't seem to be doing anything. It's just kind of like a screen. That's what it seems to us. But because of what we said last week, that tzimtzum is actually a keli, it is a recipient for the light, which is the creative power of Hashem. Tzimtzum not only is passive, it actually has a positive role because it gives light, it gives this crazy, infinite, expansive light of Hashem shape and form. So now we've introduced something new. Not only does tzimtzum shield the world, not only does tzimtzum make us feel independent, conceal the light of Hashem, conceal godliness, but now we're saying something deeper. We're saying that tzimtzum, since it holds the light, right? Because on the one hand, if you put something into a box, the box hides what's inside. on the other hand, whatever you put into that box takes on the shape and form of the box. So for example, if you put water into a red container, let's say it's like one of those like transparent reds or even not, the water seems to be red. Even if you look at the water in the container, it seems to be red because it takes on the shape. And if it's a square container, the water seems square. It actually becomes square. If it's a round container, it becomes round. It takes on the shape and the form of the keli, of the recipient. But the water didn't change. There was no change of the water. The keli makes the water look red, but the water doesn't change. So here we now introduce a new function, which is not passive, a new function of tzimtzum. That tzimtzum actually gives shape and form to every single one of the creations. The fact that a person looks the way he does, the fact that a flower appears like a flower, and a plant like a plant, and an animal like an animal, is all because of the function of tzimtzum, that not only conceals Hashem's light and life, but also gives it shape and form. Now, how does that actually happen? So as we mentioned previously, Hashem created the world with 10 statements, Asara Mamoris. In these 10 statements are words composed of letters. The letters of the Hebrew alphabet are 22 forms of recipients, of vessels that hold the light. And this will be mentioned actually even in greater detail in the last chapter of Shaar Hayichud V'Emunah. We have mentioned it briefly beforehand, but each one of those Hebrew letters of the alphabet is actually a source for every single creation that exists in this world. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that Hashem originally said it in his 10 pronouncements, 10 statements, but because of different formulas and different pronouncements, permutations, and even numerical value, every single creation in this world is accounted for according to those 10 statements, which is quite something. And those 22 letters are therefore the kalim that hold, the vessels that hold Hashem's light, and thereby not only conceal Hashem's light, but also give shape and form and definition to Hashem's light, to the creations in this world. Now, although chesed and gvura actually seem to be in contradiction to one another, one is kindness, expansion, one is severity and constrictive, right? They actually seem to be in contradiction to one another. They actually come from the same source, and in their source, they are united. So we're going to see in the coming chapters how gvura actually is not something in second place. We tend to look at chesed as, oh yeah, chesed, that's good. Chesed is kindness, and oh, that's positive. Gvura, severity, not so much. We'll see that developed in the upcoming chapters, how severity actually has a very positive function, and that's what the Alter Rebbe begins over here telling us, that gvura is not simply something passive, but actually has an active function. And the first thing he says is that it gives shape and form, identity to the creation. Now, the source of chesed and gevura is on a level called atik yoimin. It is not necessary for us to understand exactly what this level is, but just for you to know that it is a level higher than the 4 spiritual worlds, the highest of which is Atzilus. Atzilus is actually considered to be an extremely high world with very little definition. In other words, it's the first step of creation. That's why it's translated as the world of emanation, right? So it's the first step. So it's mostly godly with very slight definition. However, there is a level even higher than Atzilus, which is on the level of Keter, the crown, or we call it Atik Yoimin. And both Chesed and Gevura have their source on this level. And because they are united in their source, they actually have a common purpose, which is the creation of this world. So Tzimtzum is not only a shield, but also contributes. Even when we say the word tzimtzum, many times when we describe it to somebody or we learn about it, it kind of has a negative connotation. But tzimtzum, we are now going to see, is actually something very positive. It gave us the world as we know. So yes, the world conceals godliness, conceals Hashem, but it exists through Hashem's loving kindness. We exist and the world exists. And because of this, we will understand why Hashem actually only wanted to create the world through Gvura. Hashem did not want to include Chesed in the world because Tzimtzum is doing a great job of making the world exist. So Hashem wanted the world to be completely concealing his light so that we would really have this existence. But in actual fact, Hashem saw that if the world would exist only with Gvura, we would not endure. It would be too difficult for us to live in this world with a complete concealment of Hashem. Because the purpose of our existence in this world, where Hashem is mostly concealed, is to reveal Hashem. By doing mitzvahs and by learning Torah, we reveal godliness in the world. But imagine if we had never seen godliness revealed. We wouldn't even know what we're trying to achieve. We wouldn't even know what we're looking for, right? So what did Hashem do? He made certain pockets of revelation of godliness in this world. And therefore, even in this world of Gevura, of tzimtzum, of severity, of utmost concealment of Hashem, there are moments of revelation of godliness, pure godliness. And what are those revelations? Where do we see cracks in the tzimtzum? Where do we see revelation? In two things. Number one, through tzaddikim. Tzaddikim, the righteous people, righteous ones, reveal godliness in this world. And secondly, through miracles, because a miracle is above nature. Nature conceals godliness, much as tzimtzum. Tzimtzum achieves its goal through nature, but occasionally Hashem will allow a miracle to happen. When a miracle happens, we say it's above nature, and that's actually revealing godliness in this world. So just to recap, the purpose of tzimtzum, or creating this world through gvura, is really for the purpose of us serving Hashem and overcoming this concealment and revealing godliness. But we know what godliness is because we've seen godliness revealed in certain moments, either through tzaddikim or through miracles. So in other words, Hashem, yes, created the world with gevura, through tzimtzum, but tempered it with rachamim, with compassion through tzaddikim and miracles. The Zohar tells us that gevura is on the left side, chesed is on the right side, and that they both exist on a level higher than Atzilus, and both are godly and both are above understanding. We can make the mistake in thinking that gvura is not so godly, because it conceals godliness, but actually it serves a function which is very godly, and this is going to be elaborated upon in the coming chapters. But we do have to remember that in the same way that we don't understand how Hashem created the world through chesed, yesh me'ayin, something from nothing, we also don't understand, or we have a very limited understanding, how Hashem actually conceals this light and thereby fits into the finite world. Hashem, being infinite, fits into the finite world in an unchanged way, much as the water in the vessel, but it is then concealed. We do not have a full understanding of it. We have a limited understanding. In fact, the Alter Rebbe tells us, even Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the leader of his generation, one of the first leader of Am Yisrael, the leader of our nation, Moshe Rabbeinu's understanding of this was not even on the level of Atzilus. His understanding was on the level of the next world, which is Bria. So, in other words, what is the Alter Rebbe telling us? That even a tzaddik like Moshe Rabbeinu did not have a complete grasping or understanding of these concepts of chesed and gvura. And not only did he understand this on the level of the world Bria, but he did not even understand how this works on the level of chesed and gvura. He only understood it referring to the lower attributes, because really chesed and gvura are the two main components of Hashem's attributes. Everything else comes from chesed and gvura. So netzach is an offshoot from chesed, and haid is an offshoot from gvura. So Moshe Rabbeinu's understanding only began from netzach and haid, and in the world of bria, which is the second spiritual world. It is not the first and highest spiritual world. On the other hand, when tzaddikim receive their reward in Olam Haba, this is a reward for them having lived their lives, learning Torah and fulfilling mitzvahs in the highest level possible. Tanya calls it Torah lishma. They learned Torah for its own sake. When they come to Gan Eden, they then, yes, do have a certain understanding of Chesed and Gvura and how it expresses itself in this world. It's an intellectual understanding of the ways of Hashem, which is a reward for the tzaddikim for their avodah in this world. And it's actually compared to dew. You know, the dew that falls on the ground in the morning, that you find on the ground, it actually comes from the ground, or comes from above, whatever the scientific process is, which is compared to food for the neshama. So to conclude this chapter, as I said, it's a short chapter, we see that chesed and gvura transcend the understanding of created beings. Only as a reward, the souls in Gan Eden are enabled to understand, and not even to understand completely, but to understand a diffusion of these two attributes. But the main takeaway of this chapter is to realize that not only is Gevura a concealment of Hashem, but that Gevura fulfills a function, which is to give creation a form and a shape and a definition. Next chapter continues this topic. Are there any questions, observations, takeaways?